We calculated 33 different messages that were coming from the yes side, and the thing that we'll be watching closely over the next couple of weeks is whether those messages get refined. It's very hard to have influence when you've got disparate messages from disparate camps running across the social and mainstream media spaces. The no messaging is very targeted and more disciplined. Stephen Dann, a senior lecturer in marketing at the Australian National University, says the no side uses a form of counter-campaigning to create controversy. The no campaign wants to make it sound like someone taking a yes position is controversial, because they need the backlash brand on their counterproduct, he says. Advance Australia has been posting edited video from leading voice advocates, such as Uluru Dialogue co-chair Megan Davis, for months, to stoke division over the foundations of the yes case, voice, treaty, truth. The key assertion is that the voice leads to a treaty. The social media posts do not include the clear rejection from Albanese, who says, "This is not about a treaty." Conflict works. The TikTok algorithm, for instance, puts a premium on friction to ensure that a post that provokes will always travel faster and further. This is true even if the friction uses fiction. The algorithm does not care if a post is based on a lie, as long as it has the controversy needed to race across mobile phone screens. Ed Koper, a digital communications expert who helped some of the teal independents win at the last election, says the online controversy was deliberately intensified shortly before Albanese announced the October 14 referendum date. Koper runs his own agency, Populares, and wrote a book on disinformation, facts and other lies, after a decade of digital campaigning in the United States. What we were seeing prior to the date being set was that the negative sentiment around the voice was outweighing positive by about 4 or 5 to 1, he says. And that is not a genuine reflection of community sentiment, if you look at the polls at the time. So a lot of the conversation on social media was being manufactured on the no side to game the algorithm. So the fourth factor in the success of the no side is the rampant use of false or exaggerated claims to amplify concerns about the voice. The gentle arguments from earlier this year, mostly about the finer points of constitutional law, have given way to online hellfire about taxes being increased, governments paying reparation payments to first Australians to compensate for dispossession, and landowners having to pay the rent to Indigenous elders. Some of the claims are based on comments from the leaders of the yes case. The "pay the rent" phrase comes from Thomas Mayo, a campaigner for Yes 23 and the Assistant National Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia. Social media posts about payments to first Australians use videos from Mayo, fellow campaigner Teal Reid and others who have talked about reparations. The core claims are that the voice clears the way for compensation payments, higher taxes and threats to private land ownership. The central falsehood is that the voice can do these things when the truth is that it would have no power of its own to spend money. While the Indigenous members of the voice could recommend any idea they liked, nothing could happen without a government decision. Only the Parliament could pass laws to act on the idea. Advance Australia remains secretive about how it and its offshoot, Fair Australia, do their work. But this masthead revealed some of the tactics in the past few days. Leaked recordings reveal how some volunteers are taught not to introduce themselves as coming from the no campaign and are coached to sound like concerned citizens who worry about the voice pushing for compensation. Carson says the misinformation is on the rise. It's always been a feature of political communication, but more so now that it has the capacity to spread virally with digital media. "I think we're seeing much more than we saw at the federal election," she says. There is an important distinction between misinformation, which can spread in a haphazard way and may not be deliberate, and disinformation that is designed to deceive. Some of it is subjective, and it's opinion formation rather than hard fact, says Carson. Clearly, some of these statements are falsehoods, but sometimes it might be that one camp disagrees with another camp, and therefore they weaponize the terminology of misinformation. And those sorts of things can't be fact-checked, because they're not verifiable statements, they're opinions. This means outright deception is only one part of the online debate about the voice, but it is certainly a bigger part of this campaign than at the last election. Truth is often a casualty in election campaigns, says Jackman, who saw the way Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016. What seems different is the sort of audaciousness with which you can put stuff out that may have a scintilla of a connection to the truth, if you sort of tilt your head one way. And then there is the speed and ubiquity online. For pennies, you can reach a lot of people. By the time people can react to it, the carnival's moved on. And that reminds me a little bit of the Trump campaign. The other thing is that fact-checking only seems to have the consequence of amplifying this stuff and giving it a second life and exposing it to an even a wider group of people. Maybe the referendum is a test case of how hard you can run with disinformation and misinformation. And it's not just Facebook and Twitter anymore, it's TikTok, it's Reddit, and there is this proliferation of platforms. I think we are in a new era of campaigning. Maybe the referendum is a test case of how hard you can run with disinformation and misinformation. The Voice was always an ambitious idea to sell to a skeptical public. It was made even more difficult when Albanese chose not to set it up or codify its structure before the referendum, and made doubly challenging when Dutton chose to make it a political flashpoint. Many voters have rejected the Voice on practical or philosophical grounds, arguing their case without falsehoods or rancor. But the lies, racism, and vicious personal attacks are taking this campaign into dark territory. On social media, especially, the arguments unleash an ugliness that cannot be washed away after referendum day. Coper, who has worked on campaigns for Get Up and Labour, thinks there is a chance for the Yes campaign if it can drown out the attacks with a positive message. The only way you can defeat fear-mongering misinformation is with an equally powerful version of the truth, he says. Voters will head into the polling booth with a gut-driven intuition about what is right and wrong, so the Yes story needs to appeal to their better angels to overcome the fearful story.